What's up, it's Cinema Shogun here, and do not say that I didn't tell you so. I called this one out weeks and weeks and weeks ago. In fact, I believe I pointed this out just a few days after the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Now, speaking of East Palestine, Ohio, you will not believe what the EPA is saying about the train derailment now. As some of you all should remember, when this train derailed, obviously it spilt out a bunch of toxic chemicals all around the site of the train derailment. Now, this is very dangerous because these chemicals, they can soak into the soil and eventually seep into the water supply. We've gone over all of that type of stuff on this channel in past videos. But you see, the people who were in control of this catastrophe, the EPA, Norfolk Southern, all of these agencies, they came together and they figured that the best solution for this problem would be to do what they called a controlled burn. Basically, their solution was, hey, let's go set all of these chemicals, all of this toxic chemicals, let's just go set it on fire. That was the answer to the problem that they came up with. Now, I told you from day one that doesn't make sense to me. That sounds very dangerous. I know that they were dealing with the threat of maybe one of these train cars possibly exploding. And that would be dangerous. And debris would fly everywhere. I understand the danger in that. But when you have all of these toxic chemicals that are obviously affecting this area and you decide to burn them, what does that do? It basically, they burnt a chemical cocktail. And all of these toxic fumes, these toxic chemicals went right up into the sky, right into the air. So now the chemicals that were affecting the soil around this one area, now these chemicals are in the air, spreading far and wide. You're breathing it into your lungs, and now people 100 miles away that have nothing to do with the train derailment, they might not even know it happened. Now they're feeling the effects of the train derailment because these people decided to burn all of these chemicals. So naturally, when chemicals go up into the air, when you burn them, they're going to come down. And when they come down, they're coming down in the soil and in the water. So this chemical spill, it should have just affected a smaller area. But instead, because they did this burn, the effects from this chemical spill stretched far and wide. Now, we've heard from various people on this channel. I have personally talked to independent experts out that have traveled to that area. And from everything that I've personally been told and everything that I've seen, this was not what you call a controlled burn. That was in fact a lie. There was nothing controlled about this burn. Yeah, they controlled the flames, right? They controlled the flames to make sure the flames don't spread here or there. But they have no control over the toxins and the chemicals that they are releasing into the air. So in many ways, this controlled burn, it made the situation so much worse, so much like more devastating than what it had to be. It was already a bad situation, but it was made 10 times worse, in my opinion, by this burn. And not just in my opinion, but other experts feel the same way. In fact, we even have ex-EPA officials coming out and saying that this was nonsense and this was a bad idea. That the controlled burn, or the burn, was a bad idea. Well, guess what's happening now, folks? The EPA has now come out and they claim that they were not consulted at all about this controlled burn. They claim that they had no say-so in this and that they are opposed to the controlled burn. Isn't that weird? Because last time I checked, we followed this story very closely. The EPA, the head administrator and everything, they were in East Palestine, Ohio, doing the rounds. They were convincing people that, hey, it's safe to breathe the air. It's safe to live in your house. It's safe to drink the water. And now the EPA has changed its tune dramatically, and they're claiming, hey, we had nothing to do with the controlled burn. No one asked us anything. We were against it. This is all Norfolk Southern's fault. We have nothing to do with that. Meanwhile, Norfolk Southern is like, yeah, we consulted everyone. We all discussed this, and they're pointing the fingers at the EPA. But isn't it crazy? I mean, for some of you, you maybe haven't been paying attention. But for those of you who have watched all of my videos on this topic, or you've been paying close attention to this topic, what the EPA is saying right now, it totally contradicts everything that they've said up until this point. Why? I want to know why they waited until months after this train derailment, months after this controlled burn, to come out and be like, hey, we had nothing to do with that. I believe it's because this situation has gotten so bad that there's no covering it up at this point. They've done a good job trying to, make this story die down in the news cycle. But at this point, there's too many people coming forward with weird medical issues, boils on their faces, you name it, all type of stuff going on. And now the EPA, I believe, realizes, hey, we're going to have to walk back some of the things that we've done and said. And for them to come out now and be like, hey, we had nothing to do with this controlled burn. We weren't consulted. And for top officials in the EPA to be like, hey, this wasn't a controlled burn and we don't agree with that. It's like, oh, so now we've reached the point where all of these agencies that were working together at one point now, they realize that, hey, we're going to have to start pointing the fingers because someone's going to have to be held accountable and someone's to blame here. Norfolk Southern wants to blame the EPA. The EPA wants to blame Norfolk Southern. So I find it really strange, really odd, and to be honest, downright sickening that for months they were out here telling people that this controlled burn was the safest option, that this was the right thing to do, not to worry, everything's okay, we got this under control, we had to burn off these chemicals, it was the best, this was the best solution that we had, we didn't want explosions, yada, yada, yada. And they've been out here heavily, and I mean heavily, trying to convince people that burning these chemicals was a good idea. Now, mind you, I'm not an expert on these chemicals. Most of you all aren't. Most of the people of East Palestine aren't. We don't know about all of this stuff. We're supposed to be able to depend on these agencies to do their job. Y'all are the experts. Y'all do what y'all are supposed to do. But now we're finding out that these experts, a lot of them don't know what they're doing either. Or listen, I'm being generous when I say they don't know what they're doing. Because if they do know what they're doing, then they know what they did was wrong. And that just shows you that, hey, there may be more to this situation than what we thought. So I want you all to understand there's two scenarios here. Either we're dealing with a bunch of dumb people that made a horrible decision that's going to ruin the lives of countless people, or we're dealing with some very smart people who knew exactly what they were doing, and they wanted this train derailment to be as bad as possible, and they wanted the effects of these chemicals to spread as far and wide as possible. It's one of two scenarios. You know what I mean? So either y'all are dumb or y'all are really smart and evil, basically. That's the only way I could think of it. Because if you've been following this story, like I have, we have watched these officials, these government officials, EPA officials, Norfolk Southern officials, we've watched them do the rounds. We've watched them sip the water, tell everyone everything's safe. I've watched them try to over-explain this controlled burn over a dozen times, but my common sense always told me this does not make sense. This does not seem right. Why would you burn off these chemicals, ensuring that everyone would be affected, not just the people who are in close proximity to the chemical spill? So now, months later, after them standing by this decision, months later, the EPA is, we didn't sign off on this. We didn't agree to this. We weren't consulted. We weren't asked. We had nothing to do with this. I just find that really odd. Y'all are the freaking EPA. Y'all were there when the controlled burn happened. Y'all have been there ever since. And now, months later, now you're like, we didn't have nothing to do with that. Why? I think it's because this story hasn't necessarily gone away. It's not, don't get me wrong, it's not as widely covered. It's not the number one story in America right now. But it hasn't just all the way gone away. And that's why I like sticking to some of these stories, because you never get the truth at first. You always have to wait till months down the line, and then they'll throw out some stuff like, oh, yeah, well, you know what I mean? So, in my opinion, not only is this a bad look, but I feel like this is all part of what I've been telling you about. Them just stringing these people along constantly. And they're just stringing these people along until finally all media stops covering it and everyone forgets about the situation, and then they just go off like nothing ever happened. So now what we're going to witness is a bunch of finger pointing. It's Norfolk Southern's fault. No, it's the EPA's fault. No, it's that guy's fault. It's this girl's fault. It's everyone's fault. We're going to watch both sides point the fingers at each other while neither side is ever held accountable. Nothing's going to happen to Norfolk Southern, and nothing's going to happen to the EPA. Nothing's going to happen to the people who decided to do this controlled burn that was in fact not a controlled burn. Nothing's going to happen. What we're witnessing right now is what we witness all the time in every shape or form of news. It doesn't matter, entertainment news like this, it doesn't matter. You're watching them point the fingers and just pull the strings and pull you along until no one cares anymore. Because guess what? When we have the EPA blaming Norfolk Southern and Norfolk Southern blaming the EPA, and we have both sides pointing fingers and arguing, guess what happens? There's never a solution created for the people of East Palestine, Ohio. They know there's no solution. They know they all messed up. So instead of taking accountability, what they'll do, they'll just clash heads until people just forget about the story, stringing people along forever. But let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit the thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you on the next video.